Good evening and welcome to Hello It's Us. Hello It's Us is a program which is dedicated to educating viewers about the issues that are important to people with disabilities and those who support us. We hope you recognize that as we discuss these issues, they're equally as important to members of the general public. Hello It's Us is brought to us through a collaboration between the University of Iowa Center for Disabilities and Development, Uptown Bill's Coffee Shop, and our good friends at Public Access Television. My name is Mike Honig. I am a program coordinator at the Center for Disabilities and Development, and I'll be one of your co-hosts.
And my name is Keith Ralph, which has been a host for the show for ages. And it's a pleasure to have Mike Honig as my co-host.
Well, I'm very honored to have this opportunity. Recognizing that the legislature is going to be convening very soon, we are thrilled today to have three legislators from Johnson County with us, Senator Bob Dvorsky, Senator Kevin Kinney, and Representative Sally Stutsman. I'd like to now turn it over to each of you to introduce yourselves and perhaps talk a little bit about what your goals are moving forward in the 2016 legislative session.
Who would you like to start?
Well, I'm Kevin Kinney. I'm a senator from District 39, which is western and southern Johnson County, most of Washington County, and all of Keokuk County. I sit on the Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee. I'm on the Judiciary Committee along with the Government Oversight and Education. I feel it's going to be a session this year, especially on the agriculture side, where we're going to be dealing with the water quality initiative, and on the judiciary side, I am planning to work on some legislation that has to deal with human trafficking and so forth.
It's very, very important and timely issues for sure.
Yes, it is.
And you are a first-time legislator, correct?
This is my first year, correct. As far as the human trafficking goes, I've been very active in that in my past in law enforcement. I had the first case here in Iowa in which someone was charged with human trafficking, and we went to Des Moines and helped get a law for human trafficking because we had to use the federal statute. We did not have a state statute to use at that time. That's what really got me interested in the legislature also.
Bob, what are your hopes for this year?
Well, thanks, Keith, and welcome, Michael, to being involved with this. Obviously, if anyone knows anything about disabilities and people who advocate for them, Mike's one of the leading people in the state doing that, so glad to have him here. I'm Bob Dvorsky, state senator from Coralville. It's not my first year. It's several years there, 25 plus. And I serve on Appropriations Committee, which I chair, Education, State Government, Transportation, Health and Human Services, Appropriations Sub, and Rules Administration. So my biggest job, this will be my 12th year as chair or co-chair of Senate Appropriations, so my biggest job always is getting a budget passed. I mean, unlike the federal government and some other people, we actually have to pass a budget and it has to balance, and we can't deficit spend, we can't print money or any of those things. So we actually have to work with, in this case, the House Republicans. That's something people need to understand. We have divided government in Iowa. We have a Republican governor. We have a House that has a Republican majority, 57-43, and we have a Democratic majority barely in the Iowa Senate, 26-24. So you have the House Republicans and the Senate Democrats trying to work together to craft a budget, and it involves a lot of hard work and a lot of meetings and that kind of thing. So that's going to take up the bulk of my time working with that. Unfortunately, every session is different, and unfortunately this session going in, there's some major problems with the governor. The governor really has done some bad faith negotiations, and he vetoed some things that both the House Republicans and Senate Democrats agreed upon. He's overstepped his authority in a lot of different ways, some would say, in all sorts of areas. He's moving forward with this managed care situation in Medicaid, and there's lots of problems with the governor's office trying to deal with that. So I think that's really going to color the session. This has never really happened in my career in the Iowa legislature, and I think it's going to be a tough situation because of that and the actions that the governor's taken in the last few months.
Lots of hard work ahead, for certain.
Sally, what is your outlook?
Well, I'm Sally Stutsman, House District 77, which is the southern and western part of Johnson County. Committees I serve on are Transportation, Ag, State Government, and Appropriations, and serve on the Health and Human Services Budget Subcommittee. My outlook is somewhat guarded and about what the session will hold. I think one of the big things that we'll deal with, and hopefully early on, will be the education spending. We kind of drug that out all session long last session, and I'm hoping that we'll handle that much like we did the gas tax last year. Deal with it early on, get it out of the way so that we can work on other things. I think the big thing will be the Health and Human Services budget and the issues around Medicaid and coming up with funding for that. I think it's going to be a challenging budget year. I think there's going to be a lot of things that have already been committed from the legislature that will take a lot of the revenues right off the top, and then it's just determining what our priorities are from there on.
I think that many of our viewers may be interested in certainly in special education, and there is such almost an epidemic in terms of the number of people who are being diagnosed with autism. Are there, in terms of the education spending bill, is there a priority? Where does special education stand in terms of appropriations of funds? Does anyone want to weigh in on that?
Well, there's no specific allocation to special education. We have a school aid formula that funds all the K through 12 districts, 430 some school districts across the state,
35, I
and
think.
35, something like that. Some of them have closed. So they get a direct general aid, and then there's some property taxes. But then out of those, the allocation for special ed is made through each district. We also fund the AEAs, and they provide services, special education, but that's a separate fund. So one of the things we've done the last few years, I don't remember exactly which year, but because there was a lot of concern that AEAs weren't directly working with autism, I think we required AEAs to work with autism and talk more about that and have more programs. So I think the AEAs are on alert that that's something they need to be working with and moving forward. But it really is kind of a school district authority to deal with special ed. And unfortunately, the way the system is set up, if there's a deficit in special ed funding, it's made up by property taxes. So that's a little bit of a problem. And I know in Iowa City School District, they've always had sort of a deficit here. I don't know what it is now. It used to be around $1 million. So, but you know, that is an issue, but it isn't necessarily one that the legislature gets directly involved in because we put money into the formula.
I think my first term, we put some money into autism, and I think that's the first time that the legislature has done that, to develop some programming and training for individuals so that they can have access for these specific specialized programs for children with autism. So I think there's been some progress in that area, but so much of it depends on the funding, you know, whether we'll continue that funding or not.
Well, that helps to the clarification, just even in terms of the local control on funding and prioritization, but also good to know that the legislature is supporting autism, because it certainly is something that we over at CDD deal with on a daily basis.
Well, it is. The other thing is school districts their budget is controlled by the legislature. In fact, it's called a controlled budget. So they actually have to get that approved by the legislature on what they're spending and how much is property taxes and how much is from the state aid and that sort of thing. So it really is a lot of control by the state on through the formula on how they do things. So we talk about allowable growth. I don't think people understand that. That's the general fund spending in K through 12 education. It would include money they could use for special ed and all these things. So if we don't fund that, then they don't have money to do anything else.
So you said before, there might be, or there is a problem with the Medicaid funding. Could you explain that to the audience?
Well, Medicaid is going through this major transformation now to moving Medicaid to privatization and managed care companies. And the governor identified $51 million in savings by going to this new way of doing providing Medicaid services. It's very questionable whether that much of a savings will be made. But the budget was based on that. And my understanding is in order to fully fund Medicaid, it's going to take another $45 million plus the additional $51 million in savings this year, plus another $61 million next year. And so it's going to be really tough to recognize those savings and plus fully fund Medicaid the way it should be funded to make sure that services stay as they are and to provide a full array of services. So there's lots of unknowns with this Medicaid privatization. It's to go into effect January 1st, and the governor is still on track to have that happen January 1st. Representatives from CMS from Washington, D.C. are here this week to make sure that Iowa is on track and has the array of services that we said we were going to have in order to meet that January 1st deadline. So we'll see what they have to say about that. CMS is Centers for Medicaid Services out of Washington, D.C.
Kevin or Bob, do you have any other opinion on that?
Well, my concern is where's the savings going to come? I'm concerned that it's going to be cuts in services to the people that are on Medicaid. There's also concerns, if I was in business, I wouldn't want to be signing a contract that was open-ended and it does not tell me what I'm going to be reimbursed. So there's a lot of issues with what is going on right now, and I've got people, constituents of mine that are contacting me daily going, we don't understand the contracts that are coming from the managed care companies or the contracts or for the companies that the people on Medicaid are signing up for, which managed care company they're signing up with. And it's concerning because they're not getting the information in which they were supposed to have gotten that information a couple of weeks ago, and they haven't gotten it yet.
I think the issue has been that this is on such a fast track. It's a monumental change. It's a huge change. And to put this all in place by January 1st is really concerning. I had an email too from a constituent this last week and didn't understand why this was on such a fast track and why we didn't do pilot projects. Bring a few people in, make sure that everything was in place, and then bring more people in. But here we are talking about 500,000 people that are going to be part of this program January 1st, and the details surely seem to have to be worked out yet.
I just a little bit on my take on it. I don't quite understand what happened here, other than the governor's office apparently they're really worried about the increasing cost of Medicaid for the state, and it's been going up higher than most other things. But they really are worried about that. They think that privatization is the answer. But the way they went about it, first of all, there was great secrecy and anything on the bids or any information or whatever. Representative Stutsman and I serve on it's a joint House Senate committee, Health and Human Services Appropriations Committee, and we asked DHS time and time again for information. They would come up with nothing. They all said, you can't do that because that will skew the bidding and all that. Now, you know, there are people suing the 4 bidders who won because of alleged irregularities there. So, I mean, giving us some information really didn't mess it up if they did all these irregularities. So the scope of the whole situation, though, people need to be aware of that. It's about a $4.2 billion operation. I mean, billion dollar, our overall state budget's about 7.4, and this is a $4.2 billion operation, including the federal money and the state money. And it concerns 560-some thousand Iowans. You know, that's a state of 3 million, a little over 3 million, and this is 560,000 Iowans. And I remember the number of providers, 17,000, something like that.
Something.
Providers across the state, so they're all being asked to change this whole situation, and the time frame is like the shortest time frame that CMS has seen, I think, across the United States. The other thing is, it's totally unprecedented that CMS would come here, the federal agency that oversees Medicaid and Medicare. They would come here to Iowa and look at this. They just don't do that. And it's a tribute to people in Iowa that people emailed and they sent letters and they called and everything else to CMS to get them to look at this. And this is unprecedented. They would actually come out here and look at it. So they're here in Des Moines to look at the metrics and see if they actually have programs in place to move forward on January 1st. And I don't see it there. I know that the Branstad administration has strong-armed the pharmacists, for example. They're all kind of on board. He's strong-armed. Hospitals are suing them, by the way. And he's kind of strong-armed these healthcare consortiums like the University of Iowa one and others to move forward with this. So it really is kind of a mess, and the governor's office refuses to back down at all, to take any input from anywhere. There was no legislative input in any of this. We tried to put together an oversight committee to deal with it, and they watered that down. Senator Bolcom happens to serve on the one, and they had a vote. They met yesterday. They met yesterday in Des Moines. They had several people there concerned about the whole situation, and they voted to delay it, and it failed on a party line vote. So it's just,
and that's not the first time that
that's
happened.
And
yeah.
so it's just an amazing whole situation, and you know, the governor doesn't retreat from anything. I mean, obviously, you know, there's problems, and he refuses to do anything about it, and we're moving headlong through it. So the only thing that's going to save us is if the feds say, you know, slow it up, and they have the authority to do that. So I hope they do that.
What will the legislative oversight role be if and when, I guess the term is when, at some point,
Yes.
assuming that it does proceed, what will the legislative oversight role be? I know there was actually a committee meeting, I think it was earlier this week, right? So
right.
how is that, will that play out as we move forward?
Well, I think that it so far has had pretty not much of an impact, and you know, it remains to be seen. You know, they're supposed to take input from constituents and from providers, you know, to identify any problems or whatever, but so far there just doesn't seem to be much oversight being done, so it just remains to be seen. I think the bottom line with so much of this is the stress that families and constituents and advocates and providers and consumers are going through. You know, it's I understand, you know, nationwide the trend is to go to privatization, but I think when it's such a fast track and when all the details aren't ironed out, that it just is creating havoc and chaos with families and the most vulnerable citizens across the state of Iowa.
I have one little question about this. What if it doesn't pass by January 1st? What happens then?
I guess
We would continue to fall under the way the program is run at this point.
Right now?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, the concern I think that some have is that some case management agencies have either closed or have their numbers have gone down because some of them have actually gone to managed care companies. So I think, I don't know if you're hearing that from your constituents, but that certainly is one issue that I'm sure a lot of families and people with disabilities and other people that are benefiting through Medicaid services are facing now.
You know, this is something that the governor to me, it wasn't very well thought out. It's no different than when I came to the Capitol this year, my first year, and the first week we found out they were going to shut down the 2 mental health facilities.
Yeah.
No one ever talked about that. That was something that was just, I walked into and it was like, you got to be kidding me. Because those are facilities in which, when I was in law enforcement, I was at quite frequently at one time, you know, taking patients there and so forth. So there's just, it is not well thought out.
No, and the Medicaid situation, you know, we've had managed care through Magellan through a couple smaller programs, and they actually sort of did that right. They brought in input and they talked to everybody and they figured out how to do it before they moved forward, and it took some time, and it actually worked. Now, they wouldn't use that example that worked to make it broader, you know, taking over all the Medicaid. They wouldn't use that example. They used this example of just moving forward and slamming everything through everything and trying to, you know, I think they're so desperate to get the savings. And we're talking about getting $51 million, that's for half a fiscal year. 51 starting January 1st, to be January 1st through the end of June. $51 million savings, and you're paying these managed care people 500 some million. I mean, it just it staggers the imagination. And I think there's still time for people to contact the federal CMS and let them know that they need to slow this up.
And I think many people actually went to Des Moines. There
Right.
was
Yes.
a group that sponsored some buses that came from Cedar Rapids, Iowa City, and I believe Sioux City. This is a great discussion. Kind of along the same line, when you talked about planning, one of the things that's been interesting for me to watch over the past couple of years is the group of families that have come together around children's mental health, because just as we've had the mental health redesign for people in the adult population, that many people that feel that same planfulness hasn't happened within children's mental health. And so there was, during the last legislative session, there was actually within the appropriations bill, the creation of a study committee that is to be putting together a report coming out, I believe. I don't believe it's out yet, but I'm hoping that perhaps Senator Dvorsky, Representative Stutsman, or Senator Kinney, any of you can talk a little bit about that, either in terms of the status of the report or just the issue in general in terms of what is happening in the area of children's mental health.
That report is not out yet. I have not seen that report.
I think it's due December 15th.
Right.
Yeah.
I was told that it would be the end of the week before that we'd be able to see it.
Well, and I think the work they've done has been pretty good. You know, they've come up with some recommendations about what needs to be done with children's mental health issues, and you know, I think it's pretty thoughtful, it's pretty deliberate, but there again, it'll all depend on funding. You know, if the state is willing to put the monies into making this report and recommendations a reality.
If I remember correctly, and either one of you can correct me, Iowa has always been lack in matching federal funding when it comes to disability issues. Am I right or wrong?
That they've, what about federal?
They don't match
Oh,
federal.
no, I've never understood that either in dealing with the budgets.
I never did either.
This is my first year in Health and Human Services Appropriations Subcommittee, and it's just a huge program, and all kinds of different programs and federal matches and all that. And for whatever reason, I don't think DHS actually seeks out federal matches and things that they could do and move forward with that would be easy, I think. But for whatever reason, they don't. Well, part of it is we have underfunded them and understaffed them for a number of years. So they really don't have the staff or the ability to go out and do that. And I think maybe one of the reasons the governor decided to privatize Medicaid is because he submitted such tight budgets over the last several years. There's nobody not enough staff there to operate efficiently enough, and so that he thinks this is a solution.
One really fortunate thing we've been able to do is to take advantage of the Money Follows the Person program here in Iowa, in which we've had, that requires very little percentage of funding, state funding, to bring people from congregate settings into community settings. And so we just recently surpassed the 500 mark in number of people that have transitioned. So that's been a really positive thing.
Yeah, the agency you work for, I think, does a good job in that area. I just saw your boss lurking in the background here, Bob. So I think you've really done a good job there. But I'm not sure you get. Well, they should have more willing partners from DHS than you do. So.
They've done it. Okay. A couple of other issues that we'd like to get your thoughts on, and again, some of in terms of the telehealth legislation, or at least adoption of rules regarding telehealth. For those who may not be familiar with it, it's a concept that some, certainly not all, healthcare services can be provided virtually through consultation with physicians. I know there's been a lot of controversy around Iowa moving forward in terms, even under Medicaid, of authorizing the use of telehealth for certain types of consultations. But certainly in a rural state like Iowa, which especially transportation is challenging for many people, including people with disabilities, it could certainly be of great benefit. And I would really appreciate anyone that would like to jump in and talk a little bit about the rules process and where you see Iowa going in terms of telehealth authorization.
I think it's been a major problem for whatever reason. The people who are on the Board of Medicine, or whatever it's called.
I think
that
it
what
is
it's
the
called?
Board of Medicine, isn't it? Yeah.
Anyway, the people who are in charge of this, because of the one issue of abortion over telemedicine, they've sort of shut down everything. And I think it's way unfortunate that you could really do some good programming and some things. And unfortunately, they had like 3 members of that up for confirmation this last time. I voted against all of them who voted not to proceed and look at these things. So I don't think we can bury our heads in the sand about telehealth and be a backward state because they have certain philosophical objections to abortion. They could deal with that situation and still do telehealth, but they haven't yet to date.
I was thinking that the rules had been written, but I think the big problem is the abortion issue. But I too agree.
There's
that
no reason
in a
for that.
rural state like Iowa,
there's no
reason why we shouldn't be taking advantage of these opportunities. To provide telehealth, it just doesn't make a lot of sense.
Well, I hate to break this up, but we have about 3 minutes left. So if any one of you want to look in your crystal ball and say, what's going to happen next year?
It's yet to be seen. It depends, I think, a lot about if we can get back to Des Moines and we can get this school funding, the supplemental state aid set, so we can begin to work on some of these other issues. It's going to be a trust thing right now, I think.
Well, and in the Iowa House, we have new leadership. Craig Paulson resigned from Majority Leader, and Linda Upmeyer will be the Majority Leader. So, it's going to be interesting to see how she handles her caucus and how things will go from there. But I think it's, there's part of me that says it's going to be a long session, and then there's part of me that says it's going to be very short, because there's going to be this message that there's no money, so might as well go home.
And it's election year, and it's the presidential election year, so people want to get out early. But I think Kevin's right, because the distrust with the governor, we got to see what the governor does. We also have to see what the new leadership in the Iowa House do.
Mike, do you have any last words?
I think it's going to be great to have, we are hoping that we'll be able to do a mid-session show. We've had a little bit of conversation about that we're looking at doing that because these issues are so critical this year, as they always are. But this year there's a special sense of urgency. And so I just want to thank all of you for taking your time out of your busy schedule as we look forward to the session. And I look forward to visiting with you and other members of the delegation, hopefully sometime in March.
Great.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all of you.